with Brexit, there's we've had a lot of experience with Brexit. It happened in 2016 when we had data up to 2020 or 2021 in some cases, and we can see what has been the implications of it in terms of trade patterns and things. And so we update the impact, and also there's been quite a few studies looking at the impact, and we refer to those studies. So in Brexit, it's really a question of the earlier edition was more or less speculation of what would happen because we didn't know what would happen. And now we really know exactly what the final deal is. And we've seen a few years of the implementations of it and some of the outcomes of it. So we sort of updated that. Now, in COVID, it's had an enormous impact on economies and budgets and all sorts of things. And so and also it led to an interesting increase in supranationality when it came to medical things, where previously everything medical was completely outside of the EU structure. It was just a purely national thing. But for example, they realized that when it came to vaccines, they would have to cooperate in order to really get this thing done, and in particular to compete with America in sourcing vaccines. And so there's a big increase in some cooperation inside the European Union on that. And then we also look at the impact. So those are two big ones we look at. So what we always track how far integration has gone. And I've already mentioned a number of ways in which integration has advanced quite substantially in the last couple of years. Jean Monnet, who sometimes they call the father of Europe, way back when in the 50s, said that Europe will make itself as a reaction to crises, and the sum of the reactions to the crises will be the European Union. And that's really proved to be true. So, the sort of first big shock, even before COVID, was this realization that climate change is for real, and that it's real, that the voters wanted their governments to do it, and that they realized that if Europe all together banded and just did things, so that led to this big new Green Deal, where they changed many spending priorities and agreed some legally binding limits. The second shock was COVID. And COVID at the beginning was very fragmented, and European Union member states were sort of blocking exports of medical supplies and things like that. And they realized very quickly that that was actually making everything worse for everybody. And so then they started cooperating on producing masks and medical equipment and vaccines and things like that. So that cooperation went up. And then eventually we sort of realized that this COVID shock was an enormous impact on many economies that would lead to long-term damage, which would be bad for the EU as a whole. And so there was this kind of solidarity funding to help the hardest hit COVID countries adjust to the big shocks. And so that was another big increase in integration. We track those. It's not like just one chart, but for instance, the history chapter, we always update it to include the last evolutions, and we weave it into the longer historical narrative. So you realize that, Brexit was just one more shock, and COVID was just one more shock, and it led to one more adjustment. So we try and put it in historical context.